okay, but if it isn't my favorite little enchilada. Came back for another long dose of copium regarding Elden Ring's multiplayer balance? Oh, you did not know? This is the second part of a two-part video series about balance suggestions directed to Fromsoft, the company responsible for Elden Ring's creation regarding PvP. So if you haven't watched the first part yet, I suggest you first go take a look to be up to speed about what the whole idea behind these videos is. Before we get into the juicy stuff though, I want to make clear from the get-go that all of the balance changes suggested in this video were implemented in the past in older From Software titles. We are not asking for new and extravagant things, but for the return of old beloved features and balances. So without further ado, let's begin. You know what separates Souls PvP from other games? Tarnished. It offers a unique 3D melee experience not found in many other 3D fighting games, such as Tekken and Soul Calibur. Traditional 3D fighters rely on preset sidesteps, reducing the depth you would expect from 3D combat to only timing rather than true spatial awareness. In contrast, arena fighters like For Honor, despite their 3D appearance, operate more like 1D in combat due to auto-targeting. This simplifies battles to an advanced rock-paper-scissors timing system without the depth of spacing that both 2D and 3D fighting games offer. When battling other gamers in Souls PvP, combat emphasizes spatial awareness, demanding players to consider distance and positioning in all directions, unlike traditional 2D and 3D fighters that only do it in the 2D plane. This allows spacing, but also advanced techniques like strafing, where you strategically position yourself to avoid attacks, relying on precise movement rather than preset evading animations like dodge rolls or sidesteps. This adds depth to the combat, similar to how spacing does, which is why many would consider the Souls PvP one of the only true 3D melee PvP experiences. This, combined with the amazing world and multiplayer, makes it quite addictive once you get a little taste. However, for whatever reason at From Software, the PvP aspect often receives fewer resources, neglecting critical factors like network code, balance, and depth, which hampers the full potential of what it could be. Elden Ring was expected to elevate the Souls PvP by introducing verticality through jumping, but the game regrettably took steps backward, compromising the core appeal of Souls PvP's 3D melee combat. This setback has significantly impacted the game's overall balance and diminished the enjoyment that made Souls PvP so captivating. Despite From Software's efforts to balance the game, including the remarkable 1.10 patch that improved weapon viability by causing all initial hits to stagger, the game's balance remains a bit lackluster, to say the least. This persistent issue is rooted in fundamental problems that have eroded what once made playing PvP a unique experience. As such, the majority of our discussion in this section of the video will be dedicated to explaining why this is the main cause of these balance problems, while also providing our solutions. We firmly believe that no amount of changes to poise and damage will balance the game unless this specific issue is addressed. Have you ever noticed how absolutely everyone dodge rolls after every missed attack, Tarnished? There is a reason for this, actually, one that hinders the balance of the game in many more ways than you can imagine. In older games like Dark Souls 3, the true 3D melee PvP experience that contributed to the fun and balance of PvP was achieved through the strengths and weaknesses of the three attack types: horizontal, vertical, and thrust. Horizontal attacks counter strafing, but lack clear drawbacks. Thrusting attacks deal more damage on counter hits, are less telegraphed due to their minimal wind-up, and boast the most concentrated hitbox frames since they initiate immediately in front of you. This makes them the most challenging to evade with dodge rolling, but easier to avoid by strafing. Vertical attacks, on the other hand, were pretty garbage. In Elden Ring, the introduction of jumping presents an opportunity to refine the balance between three distinct attack animations. By incorporating three attack types, thrust, horizontal, and vertical, and three evasion methods, dodge roll, strafe, and jump, we can establish a more nuanced combat system. Thrust attacks would excel at countering dodge rolls due to their subtle telegraphing and precise hitbox frames, making them challenging to evade. Horizontal attacks, characterized by their wide swings, would serve as a counter to strafing maneuvers, while vertical attacks would finally find their strength by countering jumping. In this framework, dodge rolls would maintain their status as the most versatile evasion method, capable of avoiding all three attack types. with thrust attacks posing the most significant challenge to avoid when using the dodge roll technique. Strafing would be effective against both thrust and vertical attacks, while jumping would prove effective against both thrust and horizontal strikes. This system would create a well-rounded equilibrium where each attack type effectively counters one of the dodging maneuvers, and each dodging maneuver has two corresponding attack types to contend with. The thrusting attack would be the sole attack type that can be evaded by all three evasion methods, including dodge rolls, despite being the most difficult to avoid using a dodge roll. This effectively balances thrust attacks, especially given their numerous features, including increased damage during counter hits. Sadly, in Elden Ring, thrusting attacks, while having significant advantages and being notably challenging to evade through dodge rolling, are now impossible to strafe due to last-minute auto-targeting. Attempting to jump over them is also unreliable because of the auto-targeting, which redirects them upward at the last minute. Horizontal attacks, as expected, counter strafing but are similarly problematic to jump over due to the last-second auto-targeting. Vertical attacks, on the other hand, properly counter-jumping but also suffer from the issue of being unstrafable due to last-second auto-targeting towards the opponent. As such, thrust attacks remain supreme as the best type of attack in the game. This is evident in the prevalence of weapons like thrusting swords, double great spears and double spears, which are at the moment the toothpicks that everyone hates. The main problem is the auto-targeting of attacks just before they hit. This happens because the window for controlling the rotation of an attack animation in Elden Ring ends right when the hitbox begins, making every attack a tracking monster, while strafing and jumping become useless. Some weapons, like the thrusting sword two-handed light attack, have the rotation control window ending inside the hitbox, which is even more problematic and highlights how broken these toothpicks are. To address these issues, the solution lies in Dark Souls 3, serving as a reference for Fromsoft to effectively address the problems. In the mod we have created to demonstrate how to fix these issues, the tracking or rotation window of neutral-based attacks and their follow-up combos, including light attacks, offhand attacks, double weapon attacks, shield poking attacks, and crouching attacks, were all adjusted so that they conclude their tracking or rotation 3 frames before the hitbox. This change is what you see in Dark Souls 3 and has made strafing and jumping more reliable. To compensate for the reduced tracking near the hitbox, we have improved it during the startup of the animations. Specifically, we have allowed only the first neutral attacks to have the window for controlling rotation start 4 frames earlier. Do not do this to the combo, follow-up attacks, and the crouching rolling attacks. Instead, give those attacks a set turn speed of 850 degrees between the first disabled turning to the second one. This way, these attacks can still commit without rotating at the start of the animation, so that the angle checks backstabs to work properly. More importantly, to enhance control over attack animation rotation, it's very important to remove the disable directional change event from all attack animations. While positioning this event near the hitbox may make sense to prevent last-second auto-targeting, it becomes redundant due to the presence of the disabled turning event. The problem with this event is its placement in the middle of the window, where control over attack animation rotation is very important, because that is where most of the forward lung momentum happens. This positioning hinders character control of attack rotations, resulting in attacks feeling less fluid compared to older games that didn't include this event. To further empower control over attack animation rotation, we propose adopting the thrusting swords approach from Elden Ring for all running attacks, as that one works like how all running attacks work in Dark Souls 3. The first few frames have infinite control of rotation, which allows players to adjust their attacks accordingly when wanting to punish opponent mistakes by turning towards them, and then commit more as you get closer towards the hitbox. Whereas most Elden Ring's running attacks have a limited control during those early frames, making it very stiff to turn towards and utilize the running attacks appropriately to punish opponent mistakes. So we suggest removing the first 450 set turn speed entirely, and then changing the second 450 set turn speed into 360 set turn speed. Do not touch the middle set turn speed that is usually low. To improve heavy attacks, which are slower and less versatile, we recommend removing the first disabled turning from the release animation only and not the fully charged one. Furthermore, enhancing forward lung momentum for all heavy attacks would be beneficial, similar to what was done to the great weapon classes in patch 1.09. Lastly, Ashes of War and weapon skills should have their tracking and rotation enhanced. For instance, enhancing tracking in both parts of the Bloodhound finesse would make the attack more viable in combat. Overall, these changes aim to restore the strengths and weaknesses of the aforementioned attack types and significantly improve balance overall. Weapons like thrusting swords and double spears, which previously dominated, can now be approached and countered reliably. These changes also enhance control over attack animation rotations, resulting in more responsive and fluid combat. Rolling is not only the best way to evade attacks, but it's also the fastest method to return to a neutral state, instead of utilizing other methods such as guarding and regular movement. This also favors faster weapons, especially... Yep, you guessed it, thrusting weapons. To understand why, let's examine the methods for regaining a neutral state. Dodging, guarding, regular movement, and in Elden Ring, a fourth option was introduced called crouching, collectively referred to as neutral cancels. The dodge roll was known for allowing players to regain a defensive neutral stance. However, it was adjusted to avoid being too fast due to the powerful effect of invincibility frames it offered. On the other hand, the other neutral cancels, like guarding and regular movement, didn't have any powerful effects like invincibility frames, but instead, they allowed players to regain neutrality both offensively and defensively. This provided the flexibility to choose their next actions after an attack, including either reaction dodging or continuing their aggression. One key aspect of the older games was the consistent speed when cancelling into guarding or regular movement. For example, the regular movement is always the slowest of all cancels to prevent input drops from accidental moving before doing other inputs. However, it was only 1 to 2 frames slower than the second slowest cancel. This smooth consistency made the movement cancel and the ability to regain both offensive and defensive neutral states much smoother for most weapons. In Elden Ring, though, dodge roll is the primary method for returning to a neutral state. Currently, cancelling the recovery of most attack animations into a dodge roll is considerably faster than using any other neutral cancel. Additionally, the other neutral cancel options, such as guarding and regular movement, have become slower than ever. For instance, in contrast to older games where the difference between the second slowest cancel and the regular movement cancel consistently ranged from 1 to 2 frames, Elden Ring introduces a much larger discrepancy in cancel speeds depending on the weapon speed. While faster weapons such as, once again, thrusting weapons maintain a 1 to 2 frame difference, just like the older games, but colossal weapons have an 11 frame difference between the second slowest cancel and regular movement. That is absolutely insane. In other words, fast cancels with invincibility frames turns every attack into a 20-year-old zoomer. They lack any sort of commitment.
Bye, have a great day.
Players can easily avoid the consequences of their actions by simply dodging, which makes it challenging to capitalize on opponents' errors. And the latency in the PvP network code makes this issue 10 times worse. This diminishes the risk-reward aspect of combat and lowers the skill ceiling of the game. Faster weapons, and especially thrusting swords, are harder to dodge due to their speed and lack of telegraphing. Thus, a system that allows players to return to a defensive neutral stance repeatedly allows them to attempt high chance to hit attacks safely. On the other hand, slower, heavier weapons rely on hyper-armor, which is the ability to withstand incoming attacks without staggering. To effectively use these slower weapons and make good use of the hyper-armor, you have to play aggressively and be the one initiating attacks because your attacks are too slow to reliably hit opponents on the first try. You need to keep trying until you successfully land a hit by regaining a neutral position in an offensive stance. But in a system where the best way to return to a neutral state only allows you to return to a defensive position, aggression. As soon as you miss an attack because your opponent easily dodged it due to its slow nature, you cannot continue your aggression. This is because when the offensive neutral cancels like guarding, crouching, and regular movement are slow, it puts slower weapons at a severe disadvantage, as they can't regain an offensive neutral state fast enough to continue aggression and make good use of their hyper armor. And the cherry on top, many of the offensive options after an attack, such as using heavy attacks after a light attack, are extremely slow compared to past games where the light attack cancels and heavy attack cancels had the same speed of recovery cancel. This inconsistency in recovery cancel speed further hampers the ability to control your character offensively and makes weapons that rely on continuous aggression and mind games, like the slower weapons, even less effective. In summary, fast weapons are the favorite son of Elden Ring, while slow weapons grow resentful for being left unattended in a game where the primary recovery method does not benefit them at all, while all the other options are tremendously bad for them. Once again, the answer lies in Dark Souls 3, where Fromsoft effectively dealt with similar problems. We've implemented these changes in our mod to showcase how these improvements can be made. First, we needed to determine the appropriate cancel window or speed for dodge roll cancels and streamline it. This allows for better overall balance, taking into account factors like attack speed, range, animation type, damage type, and their variations. The root cause of the balance problems lies in having two similar speed attacks with completely different neutral cancel recoveries. To address this, we analysed which dodge roll cancels were executed correctly, depending on specific animations and weapon speed classes. Excluding the dagger class, there are 3 types of weapon speed classes: light weapons, heavy weapons, and colossal weapons. In each weapon speed class, we fine-tune the dodge roll cancel speed in attack animations, drawing inspiration from successful mechanics in Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3. For example, we adjusted the neutral light attacks of light weapons based on Elden Ring two-handed straight swords dodge roll cancel, which occurred 10 frames after the hitbox, and the thrusting weapon class in Dark Souls 3, which had a 9-frame cancel window, resulting in a balanced and satisfying feel. In contrast, Elden Ring's thrusting sword class had a 3-frame cancel window. Talking about weapon favoritism, huh? To promote more opportunities for punishing mistakes, we settled on 10 frames to ensure more commitment for all neutral attacks. We also adjusted the dodge roll cancel speed for movement-based light attacks to be 2 frames slower than the neutral light attacks, aligning them with similar attacks that worked well in both Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3. The dodge roll cancel for heavy-based attacks was made 4 frames slower than the neutral light attacks while considering what worked appropriately in Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3. We then ensured that each weapon speed class had a 4-frame difference in terms of their dodge roll recovery cancel speed. We also balanced other neutral cancels such as guard, crouch, and regular movement cancels in relation to the dodge roll cancel's position. We made sure that every guard and crouch cancel is 2 frames faster than the dodge roll cancel across all attack animations. Guard and crouch animations do not allow for an instant dodge roll, so using these cancels to dodge would be as slow, if not slower, than a normal dodge. This change allows players to regain control of their character in a neutral stance, enabling both offensive and defensive control. The results closely resemble the Dark Souls 3 versions, with the guard cancel, for example, being 8 frames after the hitbox for the one-handed straight sword light attack in both the mod and Dark Souls 3, as opposed to Elden Ring's 11 frames. Regular movement cancel is always 2 frames slower than the second slowest cancel for all attack animations, ensuring a fluid experience. Before implementing the regular movement cancel changes though, we suggest making sure that all the usual second slowest cancels don't limit the improvements we want to get from the regular movement cancel. The left-hand cancel, which deals with offhand attack cancellation, should remain unchanged for one-handed movesets. Altering it would create true combos between right and left-handed attacks. However, we recommend removing it for two-handed movesets, since it's pointless for them and only serves to limit the improvements that regular movement cancel can achieve if it happens to be the second slowest cancel. We also suggest standardizing the speed of the magic cancel, slow weapon skill, and slow item cancel to match the new dodge roll cancel speed across the board. This change is also aimed at not limiting the new improvements to the regular movement cancel, as these cancels tend to be the second slowest as well. To ensure backsteps are unaffected by the dodge cancel changes, We separated their cancel windows while maintaining a shared button input. We did this in the mod by making it so that a special code prevents all actions related to dodge roll cancel except for backstep in the frame it exists in. Backsteps, lacking invincibility frames, needed to maintain their cancel window to preserve their utility and overall fluid movement. We achieved this by making the recovery cancel into backsteps faster than dodge rolls. 6 frames for light weapons, 8 frames for heavy weapons, and 10 frames for colossal weapons. This change not only eliminates drawbacks from the dodge roll adjustments, but also enhances the backstep, providing players with more options for fluid offensive control and improving overall combat. All offensive attack cancels were improved to provide more mixing potential between attacks. A significant change was allowing the cancellation of heavy attacks as soon as you can cancel into a light attack. We achieved this by modifying the end right light kick cancel, which only applies to light attacks, to function as right hand cancel that applies to both light and heavy attacks. This enhancement greatly improves the offensive capabilities and mix-up potential of every weapon. We also improved right-hand cancel timings for movement-based light attacks across all weapon classes, setting it to 4 frames after the hitbox for light weapons and the 10 frames for heavy weapons. As for colossal weapons, which were previously unbalanced, we recommend setting their right-hand cancel across all attacks to 12 frames, as they all share the same colossal type stagger. Additionally, we suggest improving the fast weapon cancel and fast item cancel to provide more offensive control and mix-up options. For this, attacks with light and dagger-type staggers should have their fast weapon skill cancel and fast item cancel set to 4 frames after the hitbox. Attacks with heavy-type stagger should be set to 8 frames after the hitbox, and attacks with colossal-type stagger should be set to 12 frames after the hitbox. These numbers are also based on successful mechanics in Elden Ring and are aimed at aligning them with other changes for a more streamlined system. For example, the 12 frames for the colossal stagger were inspired by the colossal sword's crouch attack, which had a fast 12-frame weapon skill cancel. This cancel was perfectly aligned, allowing for many moves like stamp to be used after hitting someone with it, and it can catch players who panic dodge rolls. Now, all attacks of colossal swords and weapons can benefit from this, making many Ashes of War and weapon skills much more viable. We also recommend applying these improvements to weapon skills and Ashes of War, not just normal weapon attacks. For example, making stamp follow-ups adhere to the rules we've outlined for colossal-based neutral light attacks will result in better neutral and offensive cancels. The same principle can be applied to other Ashes of Wars and weapon skills. And the bane of many players' existence, the persistent input drop issue, particularly during guarding, has been present in the game since its release, making characters stand there like a deer in the headlights of love and making players lose their hair out of anger. This issue is likely hard-coded and connected to sprinting. Elden Ring introduced a mechanic allowing immediate neutral attacks upon releasing the sprint button instead of running attacks, providing control over attack types. However, the guard stance during sprint continues to operate under the old system, causing conflicts and resulting in input drops, especially when a player cancels a previous attack animation with a guard cancel while holding sprint and subsequently letting go of sprint. This issue is unique to Elden Ring and needs to be dealt with for the sake of some players' mental health. In summary, these modifications will bring back one of the aspects that truly made PvP in Souls games special, which is the ability to experience a genuine 3D melee PvP encounter. The playing field will now be leveled when facing thrusting sword simps. Players can approach and counter them effectively through strafing, even when wielding slow colossal weapons, thanks to the improved neutral cancels and increased mix-up potential provided by the enhanced attack cancels. These changes effectively bridge the gap between the best and worst weapons, creating something everyone craves: variety. And last but not least, these improvements also have a positive impact on PvE gameplay, since balancing for PvP often translates to improved PvE engagement, because if you are able to hit a human with these improved attacks, you will be able to do it against a regular enemy even easier. In the end, everyone benefits from these changes, and regardless of how many times poise and damage are adjusted, overall, balance will remain poor if these critical issues are not addressed. Having covered the more technical aspects of Elden Ring's current little oopsies, let's move on to more general balance problems. Don't sleep on me now, little meatballs! Patch 1.10 changed to poise values, which allowed the first hit of most weapons to always stagger in one hit, was one of the best changes to ever happen in Elden Ring. This change made many weapons more viable, and in turn made PvP much more enjoyable. But this massage spot does not have a happy ending, as there still are quite a few issues regarding poise and hyper-armor. So let's take a look at those, shall we? For some reason unknown to mankind, heavy weapons have significantly lower poise damage compared to the improved hyper-armor values. This issue can be attributed to two factors. Firstly, heavy weapons have a lower PvP poise damage multiplier of 2, in contrast to the standard 2.7. This discrepancy has hilariously caused some light weapons to possess higher poise damage values than certain heavy weapon attacks. Secondly, follow-up combo chain attacks deal only half the poise damage of the initial attacks. When these two issues are combined, it allows two players using heavy weapons to continuously attack each other without either player getting staggered. While it's majestic to observe these apes going at it, this issue clearly affects the enjoyment of heavy weapon matches. To address these issues, first adjust the main multiplier for heavy weapons to 2.7 to align with all other weapon types. Then increase the PvP poise damage multiplier for follow-up chain combo attacks from 1 to 2.7, not only for heavy weapons, but also for colossal weapons, maintaining consistency. Do not implement this change for light weapons, as we will discuss later why this is not necessary. Furthermore, enhance heavy attacks with a poise damage multiplier of 3 instead of 2.5 to ensure efficient poise breakage. Lastly, apply the same PvP poise damage multiplier from the neutral release heavy attack to all running heavy attacks for all weapons, including light weapons. This distinction will set them apart from the faster light running attacks. The increased poise damage on heavy weapons should address hyper-armor issues without weakening its strength. However, some weapon skills have hyper-armor frames that start too quickly, such as Storm Stomp, enabling easy reaction trading. To rectify this, adjust hyper-armor frames for all attacks, excluding Endurance Stamp, to start no earlier than 10 frames into the animation. Flails and hammers possess excessive hyper-armor for their speed, allowing them to withstand slower heavy weapons and attack more rapidly. Reduce the innate poise value of flail and hammer classes from 52 to 26. Then, remove hyper-armor frames from the club neutral follow-up combo attacks, retaining hyper-armor only on the first neutral attack, as that one is too fast to have hyper-armor on its follow-up combos. Furthermore, the Barbaric Roar and Warcry, unique heavy attacks on light weapons, exhibit excessively strong hyper-armor, allowing them to withstand even colossal jumping attacks. To address this imbalance, reduce the hyper-armor strength of light weapons Barbaric Roar and Warcry, unique heavy attacks from 180 toughness to below 120 toughness. This adjustment ensures that these attacks are still effective against light weapons, but are not overly powerful against heavy and colossal weapons. Also, certain Ashes of War and weapon skills may require added hyper-armor due to increased poise damage values, particularly slower ones like Square-Off's Heavy Follow-Up and Spinning Strike. These adjustments are needed to maintain their functionality after patch 1.10. Lastly, there are some issues with certain Ashes of War and weapon skills, particularly the fast spinning slash used by lighter weapons. The second hit of this attack consistently staggers the player, making it challenging to dodge due to its timing relative to the first hit. To resolve this problem, set the second hit of the fast spinning slash to a poise multiplier of 1 exclusively for light weapons, preventing it from frame trapping players. The heavy weapons version does not have this issue, so do not touch those weapons. Additionally, swap the base poise damage values between fast and slow spinning slashes to create a more logical balance. Currently, the base poise damage values for light weapons spinning slash are higher than those of heavier, slower weapons. Go figure! Currently, the combo follow-up hits of weapons deal less poise damage than the initial attacks, which disrupts priority. This is where the player landing a hit loses the ability to continue aggression. Making the combo follow-up hits deal the same poise damage as the initial hit might solve this problem, but it might undermine the reasons why the developers wanted this system, which is to prevent stun-locking problems. Earlier, we assigned the heavy weapons the same poise damage multiplier for the combo chain follow-up attacks as the initial attack, which was 2.7. This resolved the issue of heavy weapons clashing with each other, but it also addressed the priority problem that heavy weapons had been struggling with. You see, heavy weapons are significantly slower compared to light weapons. Therefore, they are incapable of stun-locking opponents. Allowing players to withstand a heavy weapon's combo chain attack only hinders the slower weapons, which are already struggling to compete against their lighter, faster counterparts. As such, heavy weapons and colossal weapons will be the only ones adopting the same PvP poise damage multiplier for both initial and combo chain follow-up attacks. On the other hand, light weapons are exceptionally fast and have had a history of being much stronger than slower weapons in PvP due to their ability to stun-lock opponents. Disabling their initial attack from staggering opponents is not the best solution to address this issue, as it completely removes fundamental skills such as spacing. Fortunately, Fromsoft recognized this and implemented one of the most significant changes for Elden Ring in patch 1.10, which allowed the initial hits to always stagger opponents. To ensure that light weapons don't have the problem of stun-locking, the combo chain follow-up attacks received less poise damage, enabling players to withstand these attacks with enough passive poise. However, this adjustment inadvertently caused players on the offensive to lose priority, while favouring those on the defensive who could easily mash out of stuns. While making the combo chain attack follow-ups have similar poise damage to the initial attack could address this issue, it does run the risk of reintroducing stun-locking with fast weapons. A more effective way to maintain priority without the risk of introducing stun-locking for light weapons is to reduce the effectiveness of mashing out of stun by slowing down offensive recovery cancels from stagger animations. This includes light attacks, heavy attacks, offhand attacks, weapon skill cancels, and magic cancels, while leaving neutral and defensive cancels unaffected. Implement this change by making all offensive cancels from stagger animations only 1 frame faster than regular movement cancel that we mentioned before was the slowest cancel. These modifications, combined with previous improvements, allowing the cancellation of attack animations into offensive neutral stances like guarding and faster heavy attack cancels, ensures priority retention through a variety of attacks, unlike the previous solution focused solely on second light attacks. Finally, there are inconsistencies with priority, where certain attacks that you are supposed to withstand will shake you to the core regardless. The first issue pertains to power-stanced weapons, such as straight swords, spears, and curved swords that attack simultaneously. This results in their second follow-up combos consistently breaking maximum passive poise, further favouring these weapons on top of their already overpowered damage. To address this, we should introduce a PvP poise damage multiplier of 1 for both hits of the second power stance neutral combo attack for spears, straight swords, and curved swords. The second priority inconsistency relates to some offhand attacks not being consistent with their priorities. The most glaring example is the thrusting sword, where its offhand can have the same poise damage for its second hit as for the first hit. To resolve this, we simply need to give the thrusting sword's offhand second hit the same multiplier as the third and fourth combo attacks. While many damage-related issues have been addressed, there's still a few rune bears in the room that need to be balanced properly. Rune arcs being used by everybody could be a solution to the damage problem, since we would have the chance to increase max HP. But there's other solutions for it as well. Power-stanced attacks of lighter weapons that strike simultaneously hit like a truck. These attacks tend to hit both hits at the same time while being very fast, resulting in higher damage per second than most other moves. To address this, a 20% PvP damage reduction is proposed for the first, second, and jumping power-stanced attacks of straight swords, the crouching and jumping power-stanced attacks of katanas, the power-stanced great spear crouching rolling attacks, the two-handed heavy attacks of fists that hit simultaneously, for instance star fists, and the two-handed heavy attacks of the raptor claws. Additionally, power-stanced curved swords should receive a 15% damage reduction. Power-stanced spear attacks should see a 25% damage reduction as they have thrust damage, resulting in higher damage output than most. Summoning friends using a password who are over-leveled currently upscales them, but the upscaling is barely noticeable. This allows group players to exploit the system for an unfair advantage. The damage of upscaled over-leveled phantoms should be further reduced, and their defense should be significantly decreased to create a fairer experience for lower-leveled invaders or opponents. Crouching is a valuable addition as it grants all weapons access to a fast attack option. However, it stands out from actions like guarding, two-handing, and weapon swapping, which don't consume stamina as they provide the same attacks as neutral positions. Crouching, on the other hand, offers unique attacks similar to other stamina-costing maneuvers like jumping, running, backstepping, and dodge rolling. The problem arises from the fact that crouching enables the quickest attack option, the dodge rolling attack, almost from a neutral stance, and it's free of stamina cost. This has led to a significant imbalance in weapon design, particularly with weapons like the double great spears, which can perform fast, stagger-heavy attacks for free. To fix this, crouching should incur a small stamina cost when entering the crouching position, but should remain stamina-free when exiting it. This change would encourage players to use crouching thoughtfully and prevent combat from becoming overly centered around this single maneuver, aligning it with the rest of the game's mechanics. And thus, we conclude our deep dive into multiplayer balance. Bless you for having the attention span and patience of a saint for pulling through all of this information. If you're as passionate about improving combat as we are, we've provided a link to our mod for you to download and experience these changes firsthand. Simply go to the link in the description, download the mod, and follow the instructions on the site. Although it's as easy as simply clicking the .bat file named playmod. Give it a try and let us know what you think. Feedback is always welcome. I cannot stress this enough. Elden Ring has the potential to surpass any previous Souls game in terms of PvP excellence. That's why we've poured our heart and soul into providing this feedback, hoping that it might find its way into Fromsoftware's eyes and the upcoming DLC. For us to see these changes in the DLC, it's crucial that everyone who cares about PvP in Elden Ring sends these suggestions to Fromsoftware and Bandai. Together we can make a difference, and with collective effort, we can ensure these changes become a reality in the DLC. So please share this video far and wide, and make sure to send it to Fromsoftware and Bandai, link in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like, a comment, and most importantly, share it with friends. Consider subscribing to OnlyWaifu, Gabri, or any of the other wholesome nerds that made these videos possible. Go out to praise the sun in real life for once, my dear boy. And as always, thanks for watching.